So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me at this event. I feel like a little bit of an imposter. I'm the only non-academic speaking today, but I do have some academic credentials. I started my career as a research associate at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne, but it didn't really work out for me, and I found myself in the private sector. So please don't hold it against me. The title of my presentation is Sustainability Profiling, which I will come on to explain what I mean by that in a moment. So, there we go. Okay, I don't know quite what's happened to the formatting there, but not to worry. So, just a little bit about ERM. If you haven't heard of ERM, it stands for Environmental Resources Management, and we are a global sustainability consultancy. We cover all aspects of sustainability, from environment, socioeconomics, risk, health and safety, assurance, contaminated land, you name it, we do it. I'm in a little bit of a niche team, which is called Product Sustainability Services, and we do things like life cycle analysis, product environmental footprinting, REACH chemical regulation, compliance, and material stewardship. So material stewardship is kind of becoming one of my pet subjects, which is kind of where the resource efficiency theme kind of fits in. So that's why I wanted to come here today and talk to you about it. And I'm supposed to say that we're a global company and we have over 400 people in the UK and Ireland and over 4,500 people worldwide. So there we go. That's my sales pitch. Why sustainability profiling, I guess, just quickly to sort of explain it before I kind of go into fully into the presentation. Now, sustainability profiling probably means different things to different people, but what it means to me and what it means to ERM is building a profile of sustainability performance, and typically we would apply that to our corporate clients, or we could apply it to a sector, or it could even be applied to a product stream, a production process. So it can be applied on lots of different levels, but typically we see it being applied at sector level. So we work with companies like ICMM, the International Council for Mining and Metals, and IPECA, which is the body responsible for sustainability of the oil and gas sector. So what I want to talk about today is sustainability profiling, how we kind of go about it at ERM and how we help our clients with profiling, and to present some examples of best practice. Typically what we find is that the well-established frameworks, existing frameworks for sustainability profiling, are a little bit limited in how far they go for certain subject areas. And just to note that I won't be going into any depth about LCA or PCF or EPD or anything like that, because I haven't really got time today. But if you're interested in any of those things, then ERM can talk to you about that. So just one thing to say as well is sustainability profiling is quite broad. Like I said, it can be applied in lots of different ways. I'm going to talk about how it's applied to help resource-intensive industries to look at resource efficiency, and specifically I'm going to focus on materials and water. So I'm really trying to kind of drill into a little bit of the detail and get quite specific, but obviously it's a very, very broad subject. And one of the key messages I want to get across is that there are well-established frameworks out there, but they're not perfect, and they tend to examine direct impacts like resource consumption and emissions and waste, but kind of more forward-thinking ideas like resource efficiency and eco-efficiency are less well represented. So although companies might, in their corporate sustainability reports, might say great things about resource efficiency, they're not really, when you drill down into what they're actually recording and reporting, there is room for improvement. And The sustainability profiling landscape is always evolving, is what we're finding, and clients need to be, our clients need to be prepared for that. I mean, for example, typically, we're seeing consumers, so everyday people that are buying products, becoming more concerned about what's in that product. So they're asking questions of original equipment manufacturers. So say an electronic company, customers want to know what's in their mobile phone, and you have materials in that mobile phone, so the pressures get driven back up the supply chain to the material suppliers. You know, how resource efficient are you? How are you recording it? How transparent and accessible is that data? Just got a few definitions here, because as I say, different things can mean different things to different people, but profiling is developing a profile of performance that can be used to measure continuous improvement and drive continuous improvement. And resource efficiency and eco-efficiency, they're two different things, but I tend to kind of think of them in the same sort of mindset, really. Again, I mean, this isn't going to be of massive interest to you, because this is how we would go out to the marketplace and talk to our clients about profiling. But just in short, what we would do is take the client or the client's sector or the product or the process and look at their current practice and critically evaluate that against best practice, and recommend a framework for them to go forward and drive improvements in sustainability and the whole remit of sustainability, but also resource efficiency is something that we are very kind of focused on. Again, I'm not sure what's happening to the formatting. Please excuse the overlaps. One thing that we tend to look at quite often is GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative, and we find that a lot of clients use GRI. Like I said, they might have these very interesting and all-encompassing corporate sustainability reports, but when you actually look at what they're measuring and reporting, they kind of default to GRI, which is fine. That sounds great, because we've got this kind of globally harmonized system. But when you actually look critically at GRI and you compare it against what we call thought leaders, who might be companies or sectors leading on certain sustainability issues, there is weakness in GRI. I'm not going to talk too much about economics or environment or social, because we're talking about resource efficiency here today. But for example, in the mining and metals sector, there's a specific section of GRI for programs and progress relating to material stewardship, and there's nothing in there for resource efficiency. Also, there's nothing there for conflict-free minerals or recycling or supply chain auditing. So there is definitely room for improvement. So I'm just going to focus on materials quickly. Now, when we do material stewardship type work, we always look to ICMM, because they're kind of leading the sort of thought process on that. They've introduced the 10 principles of sustainable development, which are benchmarked against lots of well-established global guidelines for sustainability and social responsibility and that sort of thing. And they also have introduced the 4 themes of material stewardship, which you can't quite see there, but that if you get a chance to read that ICMM discussion paper, it's really interesting. So there are a lot of resources out there where you can go and look for ideas for indicators for materials. But again, when you actually look at corporate performance, you find that it's GRI. This might be alluded to, but actually it's not necessarily in the actual indicators that companies are using. So this slide summarizes some examples of best practice for sustainability indicators that are used for profiling. Now again, I say indicators loosely. You could mean the same thing by indicator or metric or KPI or target. It's just a way for a corporation or a sector to measure performance in a certain area. So on the left-hand side here, we have indicators that relate to mining metals and minerals, and on the right-hand side we've got examples from electronics and chemicals and construction. So I'm just going to pick out one. So, for example, the Samsung Galaxy Exhilarate, their smartphone, they achieved a target of 80% recycled post-consumer waste material. So there is an example of a resource efficiency indicator, percent recycled post-consumer waste material, that we can pull out from best practice and map that to clients. And obviously, it's not going to apply to all sectors and all products, but that's kind of the methodology that we use. We benchmark current practice against examples of best practice. I'm just going to quickly talk about water as well. So again, with water, if you have a particular interest in water and water efficiency and profiling of water, there's a whole host of different resources that you can look to. But again, if you drill down and look for water efficiency, there's not much in there. So here are some examples of best practice in relation to water efficiency. We've got 2 examples in there from the mining and metals sector. But also it's interesting that if you're interested in a particular area of sustainability, it's good to look to companies that are particularly resource intensive for that subject. So for water, if you think of the beverages sector, they're obviously extremely resource intensive, so you'd expect them to have some best practice examples of sustainability performance in this area. And as you can see, SAB Miller, they report percent decrease in the amount of water required to produce 1 unit of product. And PepsiCo, they report on water saving technologies and publish quantitative results. So we've got BHP Bulletin in there as well, just a nod to the sponsor. Yeah, so that's water. So yeah, just to conclude, I guess the story I'm trying to tell is that sustainability profiling tools and standards out there, they do a job to a certain extent, but there's always room for improvement. And the approach that we take at ERM when we're helping clients is we look at current practice. We go out and we do a blanket search of best practice, and we try and help companies basically get from A to B, put a framework in place to bridge that gap. And that's a bit more sales pitchy, just to show that we work with lots of different people. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much indeed. It's always encouraging to see people going up there and looking at the real impacts of those best practice examples. I also like your remarks about the Global Reporting Initiative, which is not close to those best practice examples. However, I think there are questions here on the floor. We are happy to gather 1, 2, 3.
Because I was quite curious about, like a few days ago, I was reading an article from The Guardian that was precisely about Apple and the iPhone, and there was a kind of investigation from one of the journalists trying to trace down the source of all the minerals and components, and basically they ended up looking at it, and it was impossible. Basically, it was actually really impossible to get to the origin of everything, and obviously Apple would decline to comment, etc., etc. How do you see that? I mean, it's like, is there a way you can create some impact in situations like this, or there is a way of pushing the companies, or maybe it's not only the companies? How do you see the situation eventually evolving into something?
Yeah, well, the situation is constantly evolving, and we do a lot of that type of work where we're driving the flow of information throughout the supply chain. Intel are actually leading the way on that, and they've done a lot of work around smelters and the movement of materials, and conflict-free materials is becoming a big issue. And there is a problem of having kind of one man in his shed, that sort of operation, and lots of different materials flow into a smelter. And so typically, once it's at the smelter, that's kind of the point where you stop, and you can only qualify your product from the smelter. And what happens before that is very, very difficult to track.
Back to the mine and the condition of the workers there and so on, it's very hard to get there.
It is very difficult, but we're doing a lot of work in that area for a range of clients, and there's lots of different things you can do. You can set up codes of practice and implement them and put pressure on your suppliers to improve their performance.
Well, may briefly add, because this really will also at the heart of our research at the Institute. There is a recent piece of legislation which has passed the European Parliament on the transparency of extractive industries. So as soon as this regulation is going to be implemented, we can expect step by step more transparency, but indeed it will only evolve gradually. What is also one of the bottlenecks is that main parts of the supply chain are located in China, and China is not the place best known for being very transparent. So it will be up to companies, to researchers, consultants, and indeed also pressure from the European Union to make some negotiations with those places and then see how it works. But it's a key. More questions? Those? Actually, no. From my side, I mean, the kind of material efficiency indicator certainly is also at the heart of our research. What I found interesting, and I still think it's kind of a bottom line also with many companies, is that the thought of reducing absolutely the amount of resources used is quite difficult to communicate. Quite often we see what you also displayed on one of your slides, resource efficiency defined as a given input and then maximize the output. Whereas indeed, from a, say, more sustainability-oriented point of view, one has to discuss reductions in carbon, but also in many of those materials. And I wonder a bit what kind of indicators and what kind of tools you could envision to also communicate that message with companies and then make them think what kind of business model is suitable to then arrive at more resource-efficient solutions.
Indeed, and the pressure is mounting when you have reports like the UNEP report on materials flows.
It could partly be the kind of resource nexus ideas, because quite often you figure out that part of what you consider as a waste, even at company level, might actually be a byproduct for others. And therefore, the more you look into the resources, the more you might discover that you might actually have unexplored opportunities. That at least what we figured out when we look at many medium-sized companies.
It's just an immediate segue from Raymond's question there regarding the actual commercial value of waste. Does the GRI actually reveal any trends in terms of the market value of recyclable plastics and that sort of thing that might be used for mobile phone cases, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point I've been trying to make is that GRI goes so far, but kind of forward-thinking principles like that, GRI would typically say, how much waste do you produce, what are the different waste streams, how much goes to landfill, how much goes to recycling. It's not really very sophisticated, but as a framework, it provides a solid foundation onto which you can tag on these additional ideas to make it more progressive, and I think that's what we need to see. Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation. That was actually really interesting. I was just wondering, following up on these last two comments about sort of policy pressure, do you find sort of public pressure to have any sort of role other than from the sort of consumer side of like sort of not buying a product, but just sort of perceptions change? Like if people were more aware of you know, the initiatives that the companies are taking themselves, could those initiatives be enhanced by people sort of demanding more of them? I was just talking to somebody from Unilever, and I noticed you mentioned their initiatives there. She was on the sustainability side of things, and to be honest, before I met her, I was sort of totally oblivious to you know, their struggles.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what is driving our clients to take action is driven by consumer pressure, and forward-thinking companies like Unilever are very aware of what their customers expect from them, and they put out a lot of information into the public domain to show how great their performance is. Being in touch with Unilever, being on having a view from the inside, you realise how difficult it is what they're trying to achieve. but they're leading the way, and others will have to follow, or otherwise they'll get left behind and their reputations will be tarnished beyond all recognition. So, but it's important that the public and consumers drive that process and ask questions, and also make purchasing decisions. Choose to not purchase from one company, prefer Unilever to, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson, because they perform better sustainably, and that's what will drive a lot of improvement.